architect with Modern Tiny Living. I've been architect for 30-some years. Been with the tiny home industry for about 10 years. And so what we're trying to do today is we're trying to help people understand what decision points you have to make in order to go tiny. So I actually live in a tiny home. Mine's an 18-foot tiny home. And so, but before I did that, I went through a lot of thought process as I was looking into it. One of the first things that I would recommend, the number one countdown is, can you handle it? Can you really handle living in a tiny home? And so what I recommend is you practice living in a tiny home by renting one. Renting one for a week, maybe living in an RV for a week. Because really what happens when you start living in a tiny home, you think you can handle it, you're there for a couple days, and then after a couple days, you know, it just doesn't seem like the same experience you thought it was going to be. I would recommend living in it for a whole month if you could, but sometimes that's not realistic. So one of them, you know, again, the number one priority is, can you handle this? Understand the implications of living in the tiny home. Who's going to be living there with you? You're going to live there with one adult, a couple adults, kids, your animals. Believe it or not, we had somebody that wanted us to design a 4-foot platform, 4-foot deep loft area for their iguana, because this iguana was like 3 foot long. So, you know, understand who is going to be living in the tiny home. I also asked how tall people are, because as you know, in tiny homes, they're kind of compressed with head height. So if you're a tall person, we have to really work out how we're going to do the lofts in a tiny home. How tall are the lofts and how much clear space underneath? So then, do you have enough private space? Because in a tiny home, I'm telling you, you visit the tiny homes down on the floor, and you'll find out that I can't get away from anybody. So are you the type person that can live without private space? Or if you need private space, then you might want to get a longer trailer so you can actually kind of have a room at one end and a room at another end, so you're able to deal with the people you're living with. Again, me, I'm by myself. I live in an 18-foot home. I can just lock my door and nobody gets to come in, so it's all good. And then, will you be spending a significant amount of time outside? How much outside time are you going to spend? Somebody said, how can you live in a tiny home? And I'm like, oh, I don't live there. I shelter there. At night, I sleep there. If it's raining, I sleep there and I get out of there. Otherwise, I want to be outside. Now, okay, in the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, yeah, how much do you really want to be outside in January and February? I get that. So make sure you understand what you want to do inside your tiny home in those months. So those are some of the things. Can you handle it? Okay, if you can handle it, let's move to the next one. Location, location, location. That is so big nowadays with the tiny home movement, especially tiny homes on wheels. So if you think about it, can I just pull up my tiny home, park it in somebody's driveway, and hook up a hose to it and say everything's good? Oh, no way. Especially in the suburbs. The suburbs don't want you because they think it lowers the property value. Now, some suburbs we're working with already, especially around the Columbus area, to identify areas that are on the fringe between the suburb, between the city, and the township, to see maybe we can do a tiny home community. Because once they understand that we're not talking about trailers, we're not going to bring in any kind of trailer and create a trailer park. We're actually trying to create a neighborhood with guidelines, with actual covenants, deed restrictions. So you have to have certain materiality. You have to have this, you have to have that. For some tiny homers, they don't like that. I don't want to be restricted. Okay, move away. So can you move away legally? Some counties, yes. Some townships in some counties, yes. The problem with moving out into the country is if they have zoning laws that say you can't do it, you're taking the risk on it. A lot of people will say, I'm going to move my trailer to the back 40 of my parents' farm. Can you do that? Yeah. Is it legal? Not necessarily per zoning. Can you make it so it's safe? Yeah, of course you can. With septic systems and all the different building systems. But location is so important. The suburbs are not going to want tiny homes. Why? Because they can't collect revenue on it. You think about it, how expensive is a lot, a vacant lot? How much taxes are they collecting on it? How much revenue are they collecting on it? Not much at all. Your property value with a tiny home on it, on wheels, it's still just a vacant lot. So the cities don't like that a lot of times. And a lot of times, us tiny home people, we're gonna actually use solar. So we're not even gonna use the services they could provide. So suburbs are getting difficult. Good news though. Good news is in urban environments, they're starting to accept the tiny home because they like to see it as a solution for homeless, for veterans, for the kids aging out of the foster care system. So they're actually being more receptive to us doing tiny homes, tiny home developments, or container home developments. So that's why I say location, location, location. And I'm going to use a word that we talk about, the authority having jurisdiction eventually. That's going to be another one of the top 10 points. Number 3, what kind of stuff do you really want to keep? This is a George Carlin skit. If you know George Carlin, you know, we accumulate all this stuff, and then we have a house because we need to put our stuff in. Then we get so much stuff, we need a bigger house to put our stuff in. Well, it keeps going and going. I was there. Like I said, I live in a tiny home now, but I used to live on a farm. Used to have horses, used to have a big old barn, used to have 3-car garage, carport, hauled barn, and my home, this is way too much stuff. So I got rid of it all. And so what you have to understand is how much clothes do I really need? We ask this, how much hanging clothes do you need? Do you need this much hanging clothes? Do you need this much hanging clothes? And then you look at how big a trailer you have, how much hanging clothes do I really need? Can I fold it up? How many tubs do I need of clothes? I've got 4 tubs. 4 tubs of clothes in my tiny home and 2 feet of hanging clothes, and that has to include my suit and some of my winter coats that I don't want to like ball up and shove in a compression sack. Books. Are you a book reader? It's like, I've got my Kindle now. I used to have a library of sci-fi and fantasy. I gave them all to my son, who decided not to go tiny. He's the only one in my family that doesn't want to go tiny. So I gave them to him, and now I just have my Kindle. But if you're the type that like books, you got to remember how many books are too many for a tiny home on wheels. And really, we're talking about tiny home on wheels. Electronics. What can you live without? I don't have a TV. A lot of people don't want a TV. But what kind of electronics do you need? Are you a big gamer? Do you like Wii? Do you like Rock Band? Do you have a big stereo system? And how big a TV do you really need? If you're sitting 8 foot away from a TV, how big a TV do you really need to be able to see it? You're going to feel like you're in IMAX. So again, everything gets compressed. Can you live with that? Do you like that? And again, we're on point number 3. What kind of stuff do you want to keep? Outdoor gear. Do you have a lot of outdoor gear that you need to store? Because if you're a tiny home on wheels, pulling it from place to place to place, you may need another place to put your kind of outdoor gear. Because if you have skis, ski boots, oh yeah, I've also got a kayak, my paddle, I've got PFDs, oh yeah, I've got my fishing gear too. You know, we're tiny sometimes because we want to live outside, but there's a lot of gear associated with that. So what a lot of people are doing, tiny home on wheels, they'll build a shed. You know, they'll build something else. You got to be careful with this, because then all of a sudden you got your tiny home and you got a barn. And the barn has all the stuff. Oh, but I'm living tiny. Yeah, okay, sure. So decide what outdoor gear you really want, what really is important to you. Toys. Okay, so I had horses, an ATV, a motorcycle, a zero-turn mower, and I consider those kind of adult toys. So, you know, how many of those are you really going to need, and where are you going to put those? So be thinking about how you want to go tiny and keep stuff and not keep stuff. I made a list. Exercise equipment. Do you like exercise equipment? Well, you're outdoors, so get out and walk. Well, sometimes I like my elliptical. Sometimes I like my bike, and I like my stationary bike, and then I got my dumbbells, and then I've got an exercise ball. I mean, really, you put an exercise ball in your tiny home. Do you know how much room that takes up in your little tiny home? It's like, come on, give me a break. So, and then memorabilia. Oh my gosh. Here's what I did to get rid of all my kids' memorabilia. I'm like, I can't throw it away. So what I told my ex, I'm going tiny, so I'm just gonna have to throw this away. Oh no, I'll take it and store it. Thank you. So I give it all to her in boxes. You take it, put it in your basement, and store it. It's all good. Put my name on it. It's mine. So she stores all the kids' memorabilia for me. Oh, if you're a survivalist and prepper, and you have all this extra stuff. Oh, I got my go bag. I got my bug out bag. I got my food for a year, and I've got my generator. And I've got. Okay. Again, make a list. Find out what's really important to you and what's not important to you. And when you get done with that list, cut it in half. because this is what we do when you like your ultralight backpacking. You pack your pack, you go hiking, you come back, and then you deconstruct what you just did. I didn't use this, I didn't use this, I didn't use this. And so eventually you get to a 20-pound pack to go on a 7-day journey. Now, if you walk past somebody, they may think you smell, but it's okay. Through hikers are always smelling. All right, what amenities do you need? So amenities, how much electric? When I talk about amenities, I'm not talking about like jungle gym, trampoline and stuff. I'm talking about electricity. I'm talking about like kind of simplistic. How much electricity do you need? This kind of goes back to how much electronics do you need? So are you going to have a refrigerator? And people were talking about propane fridges. They don't, I'm also a boater, and propane fridges are very difficult because you have to be balanced perfectly. And if you can balance your tiny home perfectly from place to place to place to place, great, maybe it's for you. But the fridge and freezer take a lot of draws. I mean, it takes a lot of electricity. Then you have a microwave, then you may have an AC unit, and then you're going to have a stove and an oven, and I'm going to have a washer and dryer, I'm going to have lights, I'm going to have electronics, I got a heater, right? I got this. Wow. So what we're finding is 30 amp for smaller homes, 50 amp for bigger homes. But you can't just take this and plug it in to an outlet in your friend's house, like an outdoor outlet. It doesn't work that way, because that's just a 15 or 20 amp circuit, more like a 15 amp circuit. That means you turn on a heater, and then you turn on another heater, it goes out. You got to reset the circuit. So the 30 amp is what most campgrounds, old campgrounds, have a 30 amp plug. The new campgrounds have a 30 amp and a 50 amp. So if you're anything over 24 foot, we're going to probably put you in a 50 amp service. That's going to relate to solar and wind eventually. We'll come to solar and wind if you want to be off the grid and have that much electronics. Water. I have bottled water in my tiny home. I live in a campground. I'm getting ready to move to my tiny home on foundation that I'm building. But I didn't even connect up a hose to my tiny home. I just use bottled water. That's all I care about. My washing machine is a little crank washing machine, so I'm really kind of primitive on this. But if you need water for your washer, if you need a dishwasher, if you have a sink and you really want running water, then all we do is connect it with a hose. You can do that at your buddy's house if you pull up in their driveway. You can do that if you have a well. The next one is gray water. Gray water is the waste from sinks and showers. So I can run my waste from sink and shower because I have a composting toilet. Sink and shower, I can run it into the ground, and I can use it to irrigate food, and I can also just put it in a French drain and let it seep in, kind of like a septic system, as long as you use eco-friendly and no detergents, because otherwise you're putting bad things into the ground. So you have to make sure, even with your washers, some of the stuff, some of the effluent from like Tide is not bio-friendly, it's not green. So I use soap nuts. It's called soap nuts. And those are eco-friendly, and the waste you can just pour on the ground if you want to, and no harm. Black water is from the toilet, flush toilet. Do you want a flush toilet? There you go. Now you got a lot of water. Every time you flush that toilet, you got water going someplace. So, are you the type that needs a flush toilet, or you can live with a composting toilet? Remember, compost is safe. Nature's Head's down there. I would encourage you to visit that if you have questions about composting. But that's what we recommend is a Nature's Head composting toilet. You can even compost gasoline and make it safe. It may take a year or 2 years, as long as it has a certain type of reaction with heat, a thermophilic reaction. It can break down and be friendly to the environment, as long as you have it contained and you have enough heat on it that will break it down. So again, composting is safe. What amenities do you need? Do you want that flush toilet? We have a lot of people, that come to us. I want the flush toilet. I know. I should be green, but I want the flush toilet. If everybody had a flush toilet in the world, like the United States does, and use potable water, we'd run out of fresh water by 2024. I think the calculation is that everybody flush their crap like we do. So that is not sustainable. Obviously, I'm a big green guy. I want sustainability, but comfort's good too. All right, number 5. What kind of space do you actually need? So we've been talking about some of these things. All of the stuff that you have, all the clothes that you have, the private space, the washer and dryer, how big a trailer do you really need? So we look at this, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. My trailer is this big, from that last seat to here, and it's only 8 feet wide. Is that big enough for you? No. So start adding chairs. Start laying it out on the ground. What I do as an architect, every one of the homes that we do is custom. So We design it from the ground up. I have a questionnaire that I go through. We go through, how do you live? What's your lifestyle? How many people? All these things I'm asking you, hopefully you've already thought about them, because that's why you're coming to somebody like us, is to do this. And we'll figure out how big a trailer you actually need. Again, we're talking about tiny homes on wheels. Tiny homes on foundation, I'm really splurging. I am building a tiny home on foundation that's 325 square feet. Oh my God, I feel so good. I feel like I'm just being so extravagant. Because I can actually sleep 6 in that one. And I can only sleep 2 in my tiny home. When my daughter comes to visit me, she'll have to, I have a loft, between lofts, and she'll have to sleep on the fold-out love seat with that bar right in the middle of her bath. So it's too bad. Maybe she won't come visit me. Okay, so we talk about the spaces and private spaces. That's going to lend how big your trailer is. Number 6, design and construction. So, are you going to design it and build it yourself? Are you going to buy plans and build it yourself? Are you going to buy a pre-made tiny home that you didn't have any say in and just going to use that one? Are you going to work with a registered design professional and document it? Are you going to work with an experienced tiny home builder to construct it? Are you going to work with a tiny home builder that has an in-house designer and registered professional? However much you want to bite off, go for it. I'm doing a seminar tomorrow at 11:30 that talks about some of the construction techniques, and I'll ask people, how many people are going to build your tiny home yourself? All right, how many people understand about blah, blah, blah? How about this? How about, and they're shaking their heads like, no. You think you can build something like a shed, that's fine. What's the risk of a shed? You build a tiny home on wheels and that thing flies off, oh, you're in trouble. You have snow load that causes it to collapse, in trouble. You don't brace it laterally enough, so you have enough diagonal bracing in there, trouble. You have too many windows, the windows will crack and they'll bind up and you won't be able to close the windows. So there's a lot of things to do with design and construction that are important. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, we're part of the tiny home community. What we do is we do seminars to help do-it-yourselfers. I don't care that they don't buy a trailer with us. I don't care that we don't build the shell. I don't care that we don't build the whole thing. It's important for our movement, the tiny home movement, that we're all working together, because if we have a big mistake, man, regulations are going to come flying in. We don't want that. We want to have a good reputation around different communities. Yeah, bring these tiny home people in, because they're very active, they're very green. We tend to be active in government too. And that's good for some places. Some places don't want us because they're good old boy societies and don't want anything to do with real government. So again, design and construction, how much do you want to bite off? How much do you know? If you know a lot, great. If you don't, seek help. And our company actually has, I'm a registered architect and we do our own build. So we kind of cover the whole thing, we do custom. So whatever you want, need, we do that. But if your buddy's going to build it, make sure they understand how to build something that's going to stay on a trailer. And when it bounces, it doesn't fly off. Okay. Now, I was talking about dealing with the authority having jurisdiction. That's a long word of saying the government that controls this plot of land, especially the zone. So there's a whole way you have to work people. A lot of people are introverts, don't like to work people. Some people are extroverts and will talk and talk and talk and they won't shut up. So whatever the authority having jurisdiction is, whatever their personality is, it could be the personality of a community, it could be the personality of an individual. You have to work with them to help convince them that what you're doing is safe, it's legal, it's not against their zoning code. And sometimes people hire me, because I'm a building code official also in the state of Ohio. And so sometimes I'll have to come in and help say the right words so they can allow the tiny home on foundation or the tiny home on wheels. And the city can rest assured that we've taken the fire codes into consideration. We've taken egress from a bedroom into consideration. So all of those things are important, from planning commission to zoning and to building codes. Now, if the zoning prohibits it, you always have an appeal. This is where having help with the tiny home community and success stories, whether it's success stories within what Modern Tiny Living's done, or Tiny Home Asheville, or any of these other places that manage to have tiny homes, integrate tiny homes successfully in single family, use those to show the zoning people to show the zoning board of appeals, and they can grant you a variance. Even if the zoning says you can't do it, you have the right to appeal. You convince them, it's great. The tiny home Tiny Home on Foundation, it said you have 1,200. You have a 1,200 square foot maximum or minimum that you have to build. Well, my tiny home is going to be 345 square feet. So I went to them and said, I'm in the country. I'm up here. Here's the drawings. I want to build this. Oh, that looks good. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, it's only 345 square feet. Yeah, well, it says 1,200 square feet. I said, yeah, I know why you said that, but I got rid of a trailer, a mobile home on there that was only, 680 square feet. Yeah. And then I started talking a little more about the construction, about what I was going to do, and about how the bedroom is, and here's egress windows, I can get out. Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, you can do that. Their zoning said I couldn't do it. Literally, it said I could not do it, but they took a step back, understood what I was trying to do, didn't make me get a variance, and said it's okay. So that's what I'm building now. I got zoning approval, and I got a building permit for it. So again, that's the authority having jurisdiction and having a good relationship with them. Leverage those kind of discussions with the tiny home community, whether it's us or whether it's other folks that have done it before. That was number 7. Number 8, understand the reality of living tiny by reviewing different testimonies. There's people that say, oh my God, when I went tiny, moths were horrible. There are moths every place, and I couldn't kill them. I have no problem with moths. I have problems with stink bugs. I have to shake out my coat. I mean, you know what stink bugs are, right? These little things that you crush and they smell horrible. Well, I have to take my coat, open up the door, shake it out outside. I don't even know where, somehow I brought one in, or one flew in, and now they just, for the wintertime, not so bad. But when it gets warm, they're all over the place. I may have to kill like 3 or 4 a night. It's like, oh, come on, give me a break. So understand by reviewing other people's testimonies what challenges they have with tiny. I was a Boy Scout, so I kind of live like a Boy Scout. I can live in a tent if I had to. So I don't really have too many problems. I'm pretty low maintenance. Other people, not so much. Also, the reality of reviewing testimonies is you're going to find out from people how long they actually live there. Some people say, oh yeah, I live in a tiny home. Yeah. Okay, when do you spend it? Oh, spring. So they don't live the whole year in a tiny home. And they're giving you these rave reviews about living in a tiny home. They've never spent time in a tiny home when it's 20 degrees outside. And they don't know how the floor is. Even though the floor has insulation, if there's wind blowing underneath it, they don't understand. When you step on that floor, it is cold. I don't care what kind of, you can have carpet, it's still going to be cold. So talk to people, review testimonies about how people are living, how long they've lived in there, and make sure that you understand what you're getting into. This is all about prep work. So make sure you're understanding what you're getting into. There's blogs and articles all over the internet about living in tiny homes. All right, the other thing you can do is get a portfolio together. Pull together all sorts of images. Like if you go down there and take pictures, you may not even know why you like one of the tiny homes. It's like, yeah, that's cool. Take a picture of it. Or, I say picture, now people are doing Pinterest. So when we get people that want us to design, they have us log into their Pinterest account. And they've got all these pictures. Some of them they'll sort and they'll put in, modern tiny living. Here you go, look at these pictures, this is what I like. Me as the architect, it's like puzzle pieces. I have to look at these and I have to say, all right, what matches this, what's a common theme? All right, that's probably all about the exterior. This is probably, sometimes people are very specific. I want this sink. I want this kind of window. I want that. The more specific you can be, the quicker you can get the design done. The less specific, then you're kind of relying on me and my creativity and my interpretation of what you want, which can work. But is that what you want? So, because that's a lot of dialogue. That's a lot of cyclical design discussions. So if you assemble that, that gives us a head start in talking. Sometimes we have very satisfied customers, they've done nothing. I just ask them questions. They go, yeah. You have any images of what you like? Yeah. No. Okay. And I'll draw up something and I'll go, that's great. All right, we build it. I'm like, okay. They weren't too picky. I don't mind that. All right. This is normally like an hour presentation. I have a PowerPoint and stuff, but I have like a half an hour and I started at 8 after and I want to make sure I stick to time. So, all right. The last one. This is just a simple question. It's kind of a summary. why go tiny? One, simplification. Simplify your life. Less is more. What we talk about, less house, more home. Financial freedom. I got rid of a huge mortgage, and my electric bill is $25 a month. I have one ceramic heater that heats my whole tiny home. One of those, plug it in the wall, turn it on low, because if I turn it up too high, since I sleep in a loft, I won't be able to breathe. I have to open the window, and that kind of defeats the purpose of like being sustainable. Sustainable, you have a small footprint on the environment, especially if you're not using so much fresh water, if you're using composting toilet. So you also have another one is back to nature possibilities. This is why go tiny. Do you want to go back to nature? Another one is enjoy the aspects of life that you forgot because of the race you're running in corporate America. Too many of us forget what we really want to do, and what is you work to live. Yeah, work to live. Don't live to work. You know, and I think the '80s mentality, a lot of the boomers got really twisted up in how they saw life, and about achieving and about getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Hence George Carlin's skit on Stuff. Independence. Boy, there's financial freedom, but the independence of living tiny, where you don't have to worry. I used to worry about politics all the time. I mean, I used to, oh my God, worry about this, worry about that. I live tiny. Dude, if I don't like something, I'm just going to take my trailer. I'm going to go someplace else. I'm going to go where I need to go. That's an independence for me. Other people find independence elsewhere. That's independence for me. And finally, on why tiny, really less is more. The less space you have, then the more home it feels. Our tiny home down there called the Latibule, it means small hidden place. And that's kind of what you feel like when you're living tiny, is that you've got this own space, it's containable, it's like, you can't hug a group, but it's nice to be able to hug your house. So, okay, that was decision points. I know I went through it so quick, but I want to make sure that, see if I have any questions. I mean, who's thinking about actually really going tiny? Anybody? You are? Okay, how soon?
Within the next 2 to 3 years.
Really? Okay, great. How about you?
Kind of did it 2 years ago, but I did it my own modified way. I sold my house and I bought 3 acres along the river, and I bought a 10 by 16 storage shed.
Yeah.
I've already built my own house in the late 90s, so I said, hell with this. I'm sick of everything. I mean, putting your mind is worse than the financial part of everything. It's such a journey the last 2 years. It's all fun.
Yeah. So you're living in a 10 by 16 shed.
Well, kind of, but then I got to laugh because I also have a 24 by 36 garage that's on the property.
So when I was saying about the big
but I
barns,
still run 2 small businesses, and to me that's still way downscale compared to what it used to be. And I took a third of that and I spray foamed it, and I have my wood stove in there. So I kind of go back and forth between the two of them.
You have a wood stove in your barn?
In the garage.
Okay, yeah, in the garage, yeah.
Because you couldn't have it in that 10 by 16. It's kind of like you burn yourself.
You burn yourself up. Yeah, and we've talked to people who want the little pellet stoves. If you can't dial down the size of the pellets going into the from the hopper into the, I mean, you're only going to have a pellet drop every once in a while. Because I'm telling you, when we spray, we're putting 6 inches of insulation in the ceiling. We're putting 3.5 in the wall. We're putting another 4.
You're spraying all yours?
Yeah. Spray it all.
That's the best insulation there is.
Because it actually is the R value in a 2x4 wall. Now I'm getting into some stuff. R value in a 2x4 wall is like an R11, R13. We can get R22 in the same wall by spraying. And we also can give you a vapor barrier and a moisture barrier. You need all these different barriers to make sure vapor transmission doesn't get into your house due to pressure differential, all this kind of stuff. Spray foam insulation, that takes care of all this. Yeah. You have to cover it up. Yeah, you actually are required to cover it up because there's also, there's off-gassing, but I'll tell you, staining it with regular stain is much worse. I'm still off-gassing in my tiny home after over a year. And because you want to use what's called low VOCs, and otherwise you're going to get that smell. But with the insulation, no, never had a problem with it. But what you want to make sure of is in a fire situation, it will create